All right, so Drew, we are going to discuss your little one-pager on apostolic spirituality, and we're we're discussing it because we've been discussing stuff for 30 years and cussing about stuff for at least that long too, since we first got to know each other. And if
the answers we come up with.
yeah, but we've had good discussions, so absolutely, they should. Yeah, they're great answers, like best answers ever. So just as a summary for those watching, and I'm going to assume everyone has read Drew's one pager, is four or five things I took away is that apostolic spirituality is kind of a distinct rhythm. There's a distinct spirituality to the apostolic gifting. And one of the things that makes it distinct is the reality of what you call the second decision. There's a decision to follow Jesus, and then there's a decision to follow Jesus into this kind of life. And that you weren't yet willing to land on whether there's something truly different or if it was just different in intensity or clarity or depth of experience. So I appreciated your political middle of the road. And the essence of it is that this spirituality runs between two poles, and you drew the infinity symbol, and that on one side is experiences with the Spirit of Christ, and then the other peak was suffering for the sake of Christ. So we'll get into those. I won't make any comments. How we're going to do this is I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the background, how you got to this place. And then I want to let you pontificate about the two poles a bit, biblically and personally. And then spend a little bit of time talking about living in that reality of these two poles. The older version of you now. And then, you and I are both involved with different younger Jedi Knights and gunslingers, and really this is for them. And then I thought at the end, let's keep it short, but then let's debrief and just react to what we just experienced together and say what resonated for us, and is there anything that got stimulated that we ought to talk about in the future. So how's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's jump in. Let's talk about background. What got you thinking about these ideas? You've been when we first met 30 years ago at Trinity, we were both at different places in terms of life experience. And we've both been in pastoral church-based ministry. What got you thinking about apostolic spirituality? Where's the genesis of that?
Yeah, probably an interest in spirituality came first, only because I had a series of experiences kind of beginning in my teenage years into my 20s of the spirit, kind of unexplainable experiences that made all my Baptist brethren nervous when I talked about them. And then later, when I was a Bible churcher, I told my pastor I wanted to learn to be a mystic, and he just about freaked out completely. But I had this enduring interest in what it meant to walk in the Spirit, to a direct contact, my 12-step friends say, because those were just realities in my life. So I got interested simply because of experiences, simple as that. It wasn't an academic pursuit. It was because of things that had happened with me and to me. But maybe the main sauce or the piece for us is I did not have any kind of apostolic category. Through my 20s, early 30s, I was involved in a church plant. I was an elder. I was a lay leader, steering committee of a church plant, blah, blah, blah. And you and I met in seminary, and even through seminary, my only categories were kind of layman and pastor. And that's exactly how I understood the Ephesians 4 ideas. Was Ephesians 4:11 guys were staff, and the body of Christ was, the church, the guys in the chairs and the pews. And so short and sweet on that is 10 years into a church plant, Lake Valley, this growing awareness that I was actually really not a real shepherd teacher, typical pastor guy.
Mm.
I was something else, and I finally learned that what I was a missionary, or to use some of the biblical language, an apostolic type guy, a boundary crosser, a pioneer type guy.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
This is why I didn't fit so good at the pastor seminars and conferences.
And why you don't get invited to many.
Right. And why I spoke at one and never got invited to speak again.
Right, right. So let me go back. I appreciate you picking up two things. One is the mystic part, but also that the apostolic spirituality would be actually something different than, say, a pastoral spirituality. When you look back in those early years in high school, are there some experiences with the Spirit, or an experience that you go, this is a touchstone experience for you?
Yeah, and there have been several through the years, but probably the more profound one that kind of altered my full trajectory happened real early in college. I can't remember now if it was late in my freshman year or early in my sophomore year. I think it was actually late in my freshman year, now that I stop and think about it. And it actually happened in an evening church service. I have no idea what the pastor was saying, what the topic was. I was about 20 and already kind of burned out. I was quite the Pharisee, an excellent rule keeper. I mean, I had never had a beer. I had never had sex. I was checking the boxes on what it
Right.
boy ought to be doing. And I was tired and sick to death of it.
Mm.
And beginning to wonder if I could sustain this any longer. And all of a sudden, in the middle of it was one of those, it's hard to talk about these things without sounding trite or weird, but time stood still. And my mind is still a picture of looking at a column in that church with some kind of weird glow. And I don't know how long I sat there just kind of stunned, because I suddenly realized there was someone, capital S, else, a helper, capital H, that I didn't have to do this on sheer grit and determination. And there was this overwhelming sense of the presence of the Spirit, and that He would be with me and help me follow Jesus. And I wouldn't have to just gut it out like I had been to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, nothing happened. I didn't speak in tongues, and I didn't levitate. I don't know how long it lasted, but it was so real as talking to you right now, that it actually kind of just altered my perspective on the Christian life, and in fact on Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
That it is charismatic, it actually is experiential, it actually does very much depend on direct contact with the Spirit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. Okay, that should get us get a few questions. So let me go to the two poles, which building up the one you just shared there. It's direct experiences that end up in stories that are as real can be. How did you play out those two poles of spiritual experiences and suffering biblically, and then and personally, how go the other direction personally on the suffering side then?
Yeah, didn't suffer much through college, other than normal teenage angst and all that sort of thing. But then my wife and I, Joe, did a 2-year stint in the Middle East as 2-year kind of Peace Corps type missionaries. A lot of things happened there, but when I began to run into serious doubt, began to actually lose my confidence in the intellectual dimensions of my faith. I'd had this Spirit experience, so I never lost that, but I began to lose confidence in Scripture, doctrine, church, just because of that rugged cross-cultural experience, which was an apostolic experience. I didn't have words for it, but it was a cross-cultural missionary experience.
Right.
It roughed me up. All my categories were getting hit by just the reality of living cross-culturally and trying to talk about Jesus cross-culturally. And then there was a church plant in my late 20s, early 30s. It went well in the sense that church is still there 35 years later. And I can tell you about that church. It's thriving. But man, it was a rough start. There was blood on the floor. We lost people, false starts with the staff. I mean, it was just, and I began to realize, man, if you're going to do this cross-cultural thing, if you're going to do this church planting thing, which is kind of some of the content of apostolic work, you had better take a deep seat and get a faraway look because in your eye, because it is not going to be easy. It's a blood sport. And I think the last thing I would say there is this would be a little more recent, maybe 5 years ago. I met for the first time an old school missionary. I'm literally talking pith helmet, machete, and a Bible, walking into the jungle and literally evangelizing headhunter tribes. Literally. Okay.
Yeah.
I met this guy. We've been talking for about 15 minutes, and he just stopped the conversation. He turned and gave me like a laser look, and he said, "Brother, where have you suffered? No one says the stuff you say without having suffered." It just froze me. And I mumbled out some reply. I don't remember, but he recognized his suffering was way different from mine. I did not walk through the jungles with a machete. But if you're going to get engaged in this kind of pioneering, church planting, cross-cultural, new forms, new ways to talk about Jesus and advance his kingdom, you are going to suffer. And it's interesting that fellow travelers, he's definitely apostolic. I mean, machete, okay?
Right.
He recognized it like that. No one talks the way you talk unless you've suffered. Where have you suffered, brother? That one stuck with me. So that's experiential. And maybe the last thing I'd say, and give it back to you, on both these polls, then it was opening my eyes to the New Testament record. We Bible churches tend to read past all the trances, visions, tongue speaking, weird spirit transportation with like Philip, and we read past all that weird stuff. And we don't spend a whole lot of time when Paul begins to catalog his suffering. He has chapters. And we just kind of do a quick hop, skip, and a jump. So it's a combination of experience and then rereading our scriptures, the New Testament, with a new set of glasses on.
Yeah, I was reading. I'm reading through the New Testament again in the chronological order that we kind of think they were published. And good sections of 1 Corinthians. If you do not have an apostolic hermeneutic of I could have taken money, but I didn't. I am an apostle. Even if you don't believe me to be one, if you don't have those apostolic lenses, that apostolic hermeneutic, it doesn't. But when I read it, it's like,
Oh yeah,
it's everywhere.
What we've called the pastoral epistles, 1st, 2nd Timothy, Titus, supposedly written to the senior pastors of the churches at Ephesus,
right.
Which bang, that's not what they are.
Right.
They're letters from an apostolic team leader to his apostolic teammates. And when you begin to get that, the New Testament suddenly has texture and depth. All those letters aren't just devotional pieces or systematic theology white papers. They're living documents from an apostolic, cross-cultural pioneer, church planting dude who has suffered, who has trances and visions. Yeah.
Good. That's great. So let's talk about living the reality of this. As you look now, maybe with this paradigm, looking over your life, you shared a few of those things. What would have been helpful for you as you look back now and going, this would have been a helpful paradigm? In what kind of context?
Well, one we've already touched on, but let's see if we can't nail it down because it's so crucial for the kind of guys that I know you hang out with and that you mentor and befriend. What you call your gunslingers, I call them my restless friends, my younger friends who are way restless. They gotta understand there's a whole nother category besides I can be a business guy and write checks to the church, or I can be a pastor on staff at a church. There is another humongous category all through the scriptures, and we neglect it at the peril of the kingdom movement that we're called to facilitate.
Mhm.
And that is the apostolic gifting. So I wish I had known at 18 years old that, yeah, there's pastors, and yeah, there's leading laymen like my dad was. I never wanted to be a pastor, but I was so spiritually, I now know, apostolically wired, but I didn't have a category for it. So I just thought my only choices were go be a layman and write checks to the church, or, oh my God, become like a pastor. And that,
Run the
and
church.
and eventually, and when I had another spirit experience in my early 30s and did in fact go to seminary, famous preacher school, went off to seminary, it was still my only categories. I thought I was just being called to go do the shepherd teacher thing. And it was through a hard experience of understanding, oh, I'm something else. So that's the first thing. That category of the apostolic is crucial for young gunslingers to wrestle with, and not just take it on your say so or mine, but open that Bible up. It's cover to cover. It's the school of the prophets from the Old Testament to the apostolic leaders of the New Testament. It's that mode is in the scriptures, and we had neglected it. The other thing I wish I had was some mentoring, not so much like a book, but mentoring on how to process these spiritual experiences that were so profound for me. But my Baptist small b / Bible church culture, we just didn't talk about that stuff. And so I was processing it on my own, which is never a good idea. Never.
Right.
So a community of some sort, experienced men or women who could have said, okay, that sounds moderately weird, but if you think that's weird, let me tell you what's happened with me in the spirit. And then could guide me toward a normalizing of this manner of direct contact.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So let's debrief. Just to keep I want to keep this thing moving. And as I was reading this and preparing for this, I think that, like you, I look back now over 30 years and wish someone had the wisdom or the ability to say, yeah, you're of a different kind.
Yeah.
I've had now people say that who aren't they're not professional Christians, but they tend to be prophetic people or entrepreneurial apostolic business leaders who see and go, oh yeah, no, you need to do this. Right. But the suffering part, I don't know if as I think about that part, I mean, I don't even like to sit and think about it over 30 years because it makes me weepy and question this whole thing.
It's calling sometimes, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Like,
question you're calling, then you're probably not called to this sort of ministry.
Right. Yeah, I remember an argument when we were closing Spring Garden, Carol screaming, who does this sort of thing? And I remember thinking, I do, we do, and the Apostle Paul does. That was my answer. but then I thought, oh my God, oh please, Lord, no. So I mean, as I think about this, I think about the realization that I've been playing this game at a different level, not in a prideful way, but just I've been playing the game of following Jesus. And there's always been this gap of trying to discern, why isn't everyone else playing with this kind of focus?
That's actually an important topic for the future. Is I think we guys wired this way have an unrealistic expectation of the Thessalonians. In other words, Paul expected them to live a quiet life, work with their hands, and quit gossiping. He didn't expect them to get on a boat and start running around the Roman Empire like a madman, but he expected Timothy and Silas to do that.
That's right.
Yeah, we should talk about that more sometimes. That's an important expectation that we sometimes get sideways on.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes even to some of the missional movement discussions about disciples making disciples, and the reality that not everyone's making disciples, not even making disciples of their own kids.
No,
And
and churches don't plant churches. What an unbiblical idea.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's good. Well, we're right at 20 minutes. This is good. We'll call it a day, and we'll see if
Anybody cares?
other than you and me.
Other than me and you. That's right.
So next time it'll be bourbon and cigars. Maybe we'll do this live
Woo!
next time.
I'm in.
Good. All right.
I'm in. Thanks.
Okay.